Hi guys, it is Emma from the PsychMed Sanctuary, and I wanted to talk to you today about dry cutting and how to weigh your pill and cut your pill all the way down to zero. So I've done this with Quetiapine. I ended up on 3 medications, initially from being given one medication for tinnitus in the pandemic, and that medication was lorazepam, something that's not meant for long-term use. And I was one of those people that got an adverse reaction. So yeah, it then propelled me into more issues, more symptoms, insomnia, all sorts of horrendous side effects that you get from that. That was misdiagnosed as more mental health issues. And then I ended up on more medication. I ended up in psychiatric units. The whole story is obviously on my prior videos, and I do also have another channel for my creativity, which is at Emma underscore video channel. And I sort of separated the two because at the moment I'm training as a therapist in counseling and psychotherapy. And as much as I love my creativity, my acting and my music, I love helping people, and I love through this whole experience, obviously, I've really been sort of forced to look into not only myself, but the entire world. Anyway, so I just have this love and need and want to help others. And I used to do it through my art, and I still do it through my art, to be honest. You know, spreading important messages through art, I think, can be incredibly powerful. But this page is also completely separate, totally sharing my very specific, I hope useful things that for people that are going through withdrawal and tapering issues. Because doctors, when you go into a doctor, if you, I mean, the amount of times I've said that, oh yeah, no, I'm weighing my pill and I'm tapering it down, they just look at you like you're from another planet, like, what are you doing? Now, of course, there are people and there are people that can taper a medication in a way where, let's say you've got 30 milligrams of an antidepressant and the doctor goes, just cut that in half, cut that in half again, and then you're off. Now, that is quite a common thing for a doctor to say. However, a lot of people need to go much slower than that, and we're all so different. And so this is where people get into a lot of issues, because they might do that massive cut the doctor has told you to do, and they end up in a really awful situation. And symptoms can manifest in all sorts of ways, mental and physical. And often the mental symptoms can really mimic what you actually went in for. So that could be depression, that could be anxiety, intrusive thoughts. Those things can actually be accentuated to such a severe degree in withdrawal, and you can feel like you're all over the place. And so that's often what people then think, oh, I've come off my antidepressant at a very fast speed because the doctor told me to go half and then you're off. Obviously you don't know that at the time, that actually that's quite quick. You end up in this sort of like I'm all over the place situation, and you think that that's your mental health issues coming back and that you have to go back on the medication. So it's a hugely misunderstood, not recognized area at the moment. And I just feel very passionate about this, because if you are like me, one of those people that has to go really slow when you taper, or you're like me and you got harmed by a medication, and by harmed, I mean that you had the really bad withdrawal symptoms that basically harm your nervous system, and it is some sort of brain injury that does heal, because here I am, I don't have akathisia, which is this thing where you pace around the room, agitation, suicidal ideation, inner terror. I mean, the list is endless of the symptoms that you can get. I'm one of those people that got harmed because I was taken off a medication very quickly, the lorazepam, that I should never have been given. And that then caused this huge withdrawal that propelled me into being polydrugged, given other medications, and a whole host of hell. So anyway, I really wanted to do this dry cutting video for this reason, because what I have experienced, and through somehow surviving this and really doing whatever I could in the moment to survive it, so whether that's going online and talking to people on the online community, trying to find people that have gone through the same thing. And obviously there are a whole load of people that have gone through the same thing. Serendipitously, I got in touch with a guy called Hans. I've spoken to him in my other videos. I've spoken about him in my other videos, and he's a guy from the Netherlands. He's in his 60s now. He ended up on 2 antidepressants. Doctors took him off, put him back on, took him off, and it just created this real mess. So he basically has to taper, 2% a time, He's got off 1, which was the Prozac. He's now still on Wellbutrin. I can never pronounce that one. And he's having to go very, very, very slow on that. And so there are people that end up in this situation. Your brain receptors have been messed up by this very fast taper or being completely taken off a medication very quickly, and you end up in this sensitive spot. So Hans, he's somebody who you used to, and I think he still does, he's a moderator on surviving antidepressants. And so what that means is he's helping others on that site, giving them information, giving them advice. And he's somebody who came to me through my family, actually. My dad, who didn't believe any of this, he just thought I was crazy, ended up on a sailing boat trip. And on that sailing boat was Hans. And at this time I was in a hospital being polydrugged up to my eyeballs, thinking that my life was over. Everyone thought I was crazy. And he started talking to Hans, who was actually tapering his antidepressant on the sailing boat. And my dad was like, "What are you doing there?" And then obviously they got into this conversation about the medication, and Hans asked what medication I'd initially been given. Dad said lorazepam, and then he was like, "Wow, that's a really potent drug, and sounds like was in withdrawal, and it's actually a miracle that she's still alive, having been through all these psychiatric units and be given even more medication." So anyway, this is how Hans came into my life, and he's just a very special person, but he's also incredibly wise and one of those people that he just knows his stuff with this. And so he's been mentoring me on how to get off these 3 medications that I ended up on. So that was lorazepam. I reinstated the lorazepam in the end, and that actually brought me out of the withdrawal 8 months into the withdrawal. So I've gone through all this in my other videos, and you can have a look at my reinstatement story for the full thing. So then I had mirtazapine and I had quetiapine. So I decided to taper off quetiapine first because it's a very heavy drug. And when I reinstated the lorazepam, I went from full horrendous withdrawal, I mean, all the symptoms you could imagine, to a much more normal baseline. I could walk around, I could feel my sensations, I could think straight, I could talk, everything had gone out the window before. So I got back to this baseline, and at that point I was on 400 milligrams of quetiapine, 30 milligrams of mirtazapine. So I knew I was incredibly sensitive, and with dry cutting, another thing is you have come from a harm place and you end up polydrugged, for example, pardon me, or you're just harmed. You've had a bad experience on the medication, and actually you're having a real struggling to come off, and you need to go slow. Anything can kind of tip the boat. So for example, the quetiapine that I was taking was an extended release pill, so a hard pill. Extended release means that it extends over time. So I'm taking that pill into my system, and it's slowly releasing. It's got this coat on it that slowly releases it into my bloodstream. You can also get these pills in instant release, which means that you're getting all of the pill instantly. So my qualm with this was that I knew that I had to stay on this exact brand and this exact pill because I was so sensitive that any brand change was not an option. I tried that on the mirtazapine. Well, accidentally, I didn't know. I was given a different brand of mirtazapine at the pharmacy, and I started having derealization and all sorts of weird things going on. So I knew when I did that reinstatement, wow, anything could rock the boat right now. I need to be really careful. So this is also common in the withdrawal community, not to change your brand, but just to take that off the table. So it can give people setbacks. You don't know where these pills are actually coming from in the world. It's kind of wild, the whole thing. Some people obviously are fine. It's not one size fits all, but if you are sensitive and harmed. So this leads me on to the dry cutting, because this is the reason why I decided to dry cut all the way down to 0 on the quetiapine, is because of that history and the fact that I knew I had to stay on this exact pill and the same brand until I was off. So I'm now actually off it. I tapered from 400 to 0, and that was a very interesting process. The last bits of it when you're doing a dry cut. So this is what people ask me the most, is obviously with a scale. So I've got these scales. How the hell do you weigh your pill? How do you get it down to the 0? How do you know? Because obviously that's a tiny, I mean, it becomes like a crumb on your finger. So I'm going to tell you how I did it. And this is what I plan to do with my Quetiapine. So at the moment, I'm on my last taper. I'm off the lorazepam. I water tapered that. So that was much easier because I could put the pill that I had of lorazepam straight into water and make my own solution. It dissolved, it was absolutely fine, and there was no need to change anything apart from the fact that I was going from the pill to a water form, which I actually did over 2 weeks. So I gradually crossed my pill to water. But I didn't do a liquid compound, I didn't change my brand, I stayed on the same brand all the way to 0. And obviously with water, the thing is you can syringe the little bits out. You know, with a dry cut, obviously, it's a little bit trickier because you've got these tiny crumbs. Anyway, if you're like me and you're brand sensitive and you've been really harmed and you can't switch to water, because that's another thing. For me to switch to water for the Quetiapine was really difficult. The pill didn't dissolve in water, and also my brand didn't come in liquid form. So my Quetiapine brand didn't come in liquid form. So it would mean that I would have to have changed brand completely. And the fact that I'm on extended release meant that it would also be instant. If I changed brand, it would then be instant. And that's also can really destabilize people with these extended release pills. All of a sudden going to instant can actually be a bit of a shock, especially depending if you're on a very big dose. So for example, I was on 400. I mean, that's a lot to instantly get into your system. So this is how I came to dry cutting. And I'm explaining all of that because I know that this whole situation can become completely insane and ridiculous. And you think, is anyone else going through this? Is anyone else having to figure this all out? Because it's really wild. And the whole thing is, I mean, it's just madness, to be honest, isn't it? So you become a scientist. Now, I'm really sorry about these. These are a bit dirty, but I've had them for 4 years now. I've been tapering for 4 years off of all my drugs. So now I've only got my Quetiapine. So I can happily say I've got half the pill here because I'm now down to 11 milligrams from 30. So I've been slowly tapering this, and very much like the Quetiapine, you start with 10%. Start with 10% of your dose. And you see how that lands. I always leave it a month, so 4 weeks. And I keep a log in my phone or in my diary. And if I notice any symptoms at certain points, my dog's just drinking water, by the way, if you can hear slotching, he likes to do this. So for example, the Quetiapine, when I cut the Quetiapine, I always got affected 2 weeks, 2 weeks on the dot. From the moment I tapered it, I would have symptoms. I'd let those pass and then I'd carry on. And I got into a kind of, well, a good rhythm with the Quetiapine with that, because I noticed that that was really when I was going to feel the taper, 2 weeks. So I knew I didn't have to wait necessarily 4 weeks. Whereas with the mirtazapine, now this affects me 4 days, 10 days, and 1 month out from when I taper it. Very, very different. Obviously, if you're doing a water taper like the lorazepam, for example, that's like taking a tiny bit out a day. So it's so gradual. It's that hyperbolic way of tapering. That's what it's called, hyperbolic. And so that initially can be very gentle. But as you get down to those smaller amounts of water, that syringe is actually then taking out more percentage because you've got less water. So that's when you slow things down. Anyway, that's a whole other thing, and I'm actually going to do a separate video for the water taper. This is dry cutting. It's so easy to go off on tangents because there's so much information, isn't there? So let's forget about the water tapering, but just to explain, I suppose, how slow sometimes this needs to go. And the fact that you can also do that by dry cutting, because I have. So I've done the water taper with the lorazepam, and I've also done this dry cut with the quetiapine, and I'm doing it with the mirtazapine. Again, the mirtazapine, I cannot change this to water. I will 100% be destabilized. A brand change in this pill makes me have derealization. I dread to think what water will do. And I think when you've experienced what we have experienced when we've gone through this, it's just like, if I can dry cut off the pill, I'm just going to dry cut off the pill, okay? So we have the scales. Now, we turn on the scales. Now, when you get the scales, you do this little thing. There's weights here, and you basically, well, I suppose you set the scales, and there will be instructions to do how to do that to make sure your scale is all balanced and it's all saying the right thing. So now I have this on grams. So this is how I do my measuring, always from grams. Don't know why it's doing that. It's saying uncensored. Maybe it's because it's not on the floor. So yeah, okay. So basically you've got that. Now here we are, my half of mirtazapine, but obviously this used to be a full pill. So what you do, you've got your pill, whatever dosage you've got. I mean, if you're starting from a full pill, or even if you're starting from this, half a pill, what you want to do is you want to get 10 of that amount, 10 of these, 10 of the pill that you're tapering from, and you want to weigh each of those pills, and you write down the weight of that pill. And the reason why you do this is because you want to get an average weight of how much one of these actually weigh, because there's slight discrepancies in the pills in terms of their weight. So it's just good to get that overall average of how much the pill actually weighs, because what you'll do is each time you work out how much you're taking off, you take that off that average amount. So for example, how much does this half a pill weigh? 15. Okay, so full pill is 30 milligrams. I don't know if this will work because it will comes off I'll have to do it down here. So that weighs 15. Now, as I say, you work out your average. There's slight discrepancies, and so you just want to make sure by weighing 10 of them that you've got a very healthy average. And like I say, then you go, okay, so this first cut I'm going to do is 10%. What's 10% of my average dose? So it's just a way of being very exact, because sometimes we're so sensitive, we really do need to be this exact. And this is how I have managed to do it, really. Okay, I'm going to change angles so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, I've decided to hold this because, so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so here we have, okay, the scale. Let's take that off because that looks really confused. So another thing is can you see I've taken that off, but it says 0.008. You want to always just clear that and make sure it's at 0. It's really, really important. Sometimes that can happen. It just gets a bit confused, and you put your pill on there. And as you can see, that says 15. So also another thing that I use is these. So this blade has like a kind of side to it. Can you see? And it's like, so you can hold that side and you can chisel away. And honestly, they are amazing. They really, really cut the pill. And it's like literally shaving bits off the side of it, which is really, really good. So this scale, as you can see, now the lowest it goes is 0.008. That's actually the lowest this goes. So when I was doing my quetiapine and I had my pill on here, it would be literally, I mean, it would be tiny. It's nowhere near that. It would be a tiny, tiny crumb that it would end up on 0.008. Okay, here we are. So let's put this on. Da, 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 da. As you can see, that's grams. Sorry, it's a little bit, a bit messy. Now let's put that on. What's that going to do? Okay, so that is not weighing as anything. Can you see? So you could get down to that amount and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? This is not copying. This is not measuring. So what you do is you get an amount that weighs to 0.08. So this little piece here is obviously much less than 0.08. In here, this is what you end up doing, saving all of your shavings. Let's see what other little bit I can find. Okay, here we go. This will give you an... So here we are. We've got 0.011, okay? So you could shave a little bit off that and it will go down to 0.08. So as you can see, this can be a bit of a faff, but honestly, it's this over, you know, potentially having a setback for changing to water or another brand if you're brand sensitive. So here I am with that 11 bit. I'm just trying to get it to 8. Okay. Can you see that's gone to 0.08? Now, actually, sometimes it will go to 0.06, but it's a bit off and on, and you can't really trust, you know what I mean? You want this to be exact. So as you can see, you ended up with all these little shavings. These you can actually keep because at this point, you know, you're really down to those last bits. And as we know with tapering, that actually it is the last bits that are very, very important. Those last like few mgs that the doctor says it's ridiculous that you're still on is actually incredibly important. So, and I can vouch for that because even at this 0.08, I was still having symptoms. I was still being affected by the taper. So, right. So what you do from here is you basically chip off a little bit of this to make it 0.06. So how I tapered is I went from 0.08 to 0.06 to 0.04 to 0.02. Obviously on here it's 0.008, 0.006, but I'm just shortening it because it's a lot of numbers. 0.002 and then 0.001. Now, you kind of have to do this by eye, but the 0.06 is, you know, it's a little bit less than this, right? But what's actually great is 0.04 is half. It's half of this. So you look at this and you think, well, what's half of that? And you cut this in half. Okay. Now, this can be fiddly, very fiddly, and you do it by eye, but it's 100% possible. Now, this is what I did. So you cut it in half and you've got 0.04, 0.04. I don't know if that's exact right now, but I'm just doing it as an example. So that gives you your halfway down dose. Now the next taper that I did was to 0.02. That's going to be half of the 4. So let's move that away. So then you cut this into half. Let's see. Okay, you know, we're kind of getting there. Okay, so I feel like I took half of that off. That was quite a bit off that I took out there. This is then 0.02. So to get down to 0.001, which is the final thing, is you cut the 2 in half. Okay, so here you can see that's actually that's a better cut. It is possible. I'm just kind of doing this to make an example to you. Obviously you would be a little bit more, well, you would be much more precise when you do this by eye, just having a look at the 2 bits in front of you and thinking, right, they look even. Yeah, so basically that is 0.01, 0.01. That's the last dose that you can't go any lower than that. And so, I mean, it might actually end up being even smaller than that. It depends on your pill. But that's how I did it. That's how I tapered from 0.08, the lowest on the scales. I did it from there. And from I went down to 0.01, 0.001. So yeah, I'm going to come back. Here I am. So I wanted to show that not perfectly, because the thing is this is hard. This is a tricky thing to do. But when you are in a situation where you don't have another option, I just want to let you know that this is an option. And doctors will tell you and make you feel ridiculous and stupid and like crazy for doing this whole kind of weighing and cutting and, but actually, this has saved my life, because if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't have got this pill off this pill, Quetiapine. I would never have got off it. I needed to go slow. I needed to do those last bits really slowly. A lot of people will say, oh, just jump off at 10 milligrams, jump off at 5 milligrams, jump off at 3 milligrams, 2 milligrams. I went down to 0.001. And that is something that Han has told me to do. He believes that the lower you go, so obviously you go down to that last crumb, the less of a chance, I mean, there will be no chance basically of you having any sort of relapse or any sort of withdrawal, any sort of rebound effect. And I can vouch for the fact that I did not. And I came from such a severe history of the benzo withdrawal and awful symptoms whilst tapering and, all of the stuff. So yeah, I really tapered down to that last bit, and I really noticed when I came off the Quetiapine, I had that anxiety of, am I going to be okay? Because I'd had such bad experience just even moving the slightest before. And I came off it and I was fine. My tinnitus got worse, and I had a bit of sensitivity to eating things like dark chocolate. That's the only vice for me now. Like, I don't have coffee, I don't have alcohol, I don't have sugar, but dark chocolate occasionally. And I noticed that 2 bits of dark chocolate when I came off that Quetiapine, I had really, strong heart palpitations and strange feelings in the body. So, I was definitely sensitive when I came off, but I did not have debilitating symptoms, and I was still sleeping, which is obviously, as we know, very important. So yeah, I just want to say, obviously, I'm not a medical professional and I am not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. However, from my experience through this very, very layered, awful, terrifying ordeal, I have really come up against the misunderstanding and unrepresentation, unrecognized, completely denied area of all this. And it's incredibly devastating. And if you don't taper slowly, and if you are in my situation where you have to, I mean, it's really, it's life-threatening, and to be in that sort of torture is just not manageable. And a lot of people do end up taking their lives because it's just so horrendous. And I was there for a long time, and I held on. And through my story, you can obviously hear what actually happened and what I went through. One thing that I will say is, if you are in a place where you're really, really suffering and you've got a lot of medication to come off, or if you're like me and you were polydrugged and you had 3, and you're thinking, oh my God, I can't do this for years of my life. I can't taper like this. I was there, and for me, I just felt like this should never have happened to me. This should never happen to anyone. And I just had this belief and faith that the body heals, the brain heals. And when I had this reinstatement situation, it showed me that our nervous systems are just so dysregulated by the pill, but actually we are still very much there. So I felt like I was so damaged, and I felt like I had, irreparable brain damage from the symptoms I was experiencing. And I know people will understand what I'm saying by that. I just thought, I'm completely done for. Like, I can't come back from this. I had feelings where I felt like I was being crushed by gravity. I mean, inexplicable feelings in the body that are just not of this earth. Yeah, movement disorders, incredible pain throughout my body, eyesight issues, hearing issues, speech issues, all the issues, digestive issues, anything, you name it, I had it. So what that reinstatement, and by the reinstatement is I reinstated that initial drug that caused the withdrawal 8 months out, which is, it's sort of unheard of really to reinstate that late out, but you know, what do you do when you're like that? And it was something that Hans had sort of said, and I took 0.05, so that was half of the dose I was initially on, being 1 milligram. Anyway, but what it showed me was the fact that my system was completely brought back to baseline by that reinstatement. So like eyesight issues, hearing issues, movement disorder, intrusive thoughts, the burning, the pain, all went away after 30 minutes of reinstating that drug. And so what it shows you is that whatever these drugs are doing is they're warping our nervous system, but it doesn't mean that we're damaged forever. And I just want to say that because that really was the lesson that I came back with, was that when you're going through this, you think that you're basically dead and there's no way that you're going to heal from it. Like, who heals from these kinds of symptoms? But as soon as your body can get back into that regulation, so I see the nervous system like this, going like this. As soon as it can get back to, like, they call it the waves, you know, windows and waves. As soon as it can get back to, oh, I'm going through a wave, window. Oh, another wave, window. And that can happen. And your nervous system's just like going through this kind of, you know, and it's sort of non-linear, isn't it? For a lot of people, they can feel like all of a sudden they've got this window of calm. And then all of a sudden, oh, there'll be another wave. And I just see it as how our nervous system's so deeply delicate, if we think about it in general. But these drugs, with the drug harm, it's like they're sore, they're harmed. And it's like, we can also have setbacks in this. And this is why I want to do this video, and I'll conclude it with this, is because, you know, sometimes changing your brand can give you a setback. Sometimes changing to water can give you a setback. And sometimes you just need to dry cut off your pill and just stay on that one pill until you're off. And I know a lot of people in that situation where their brain is just so accustomed, it can't take any more changes. It just needs to stay on that pill. And I know a lot of people worry and they think, well, how the hell am I going to taper off it? How can I do those last little bits? I know I made that look a bit faffy and everything, and it is with all those little bits, but it's totally possible. And I did that. And, you know, lastly, I'll just recap, and I'll also write this in the description because I know I haven't got it written down. But the scale is grams. It goes down to 0.008. That is the lowest, most trusted weight you can go down to on those scales. And it will, you know, I can trust that 0.008. From there, I tapered to 0.006. From there, 0.004. From there, 0.002. From there, 0.001. Now, obviously, it's a body-led taper. You do that, you taper those very, very delicate amounts. You work out, you know, those last bits just to be super slow. I mean, even before then, I sort of really, really slowed it down when I was around the kind of like 10 milligram, 20 milligram mark of the Quetiapine. When I was at 400 milligrams, for example, even though I'd been very harmed, I managed to get down to 150 milligrams in 50 drops from 400. Pardon me. I had Hans there kind of mentoring me, but I also had a psychiatrist because he had to give me the medication and I needed it from a psychiatrist because I wanted to stay on the same brand, so I had to go private. Yeah. Anyway, the things that you have to do. So I tried those 50s. They were fine. Those at that larger dose of 400. Everyone's different, but they do say that the bigger the dose, those high bits can often not be as, you know, challenging. However, if you are really harmed, it doesn't matter what dose you're at, you know. So I was a bit surprised, to be honest, because, for example, the mirtazapine, I couldn't move that at all after my reinstatement. You know, I was at 30 milligrams. Moving it to 25 milligrams took 2 goes. And I was really, 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 really scared and terrified by what happened to me when I moved those and did those cuts. I mean, it was terrifying. So I left it 25 milligrams because again, when you're polydrugged, you've got more than one medication. It's really trial and error. So it was like I tried the Quetiapine, and then I left it for a bit, tried the mirtazapine. Okay, that's not moving right now. I'm going to leave that, and I left that to the end. So it's really that trial and error of like, what's your body able to do in that moment? Body led. And doctors will tell you all sorts of things, but they really don't know. And actually, even me, somebody who does know about this, wouldn't be able to tell you how your body's going to react because we're so different, aren't we? We're all so different. And it's really important for you to listen to how you're reacting to the taper. So I conclude, I hope that's useful. I do tend to go off on tangents, but I don't know. It's a hugely layered experience, and I think it's important to just try and convey it in the most real, authentic way. And yeah, any questions, please do contact. I do have a page on Instagram at the PsychMed Sanctuary that I'm constantly uploading videos to, and I want to get better on the YouTube as well because, there is a community here as well, and I do prefer making like proper videos. So that's the plan, is to keep making them. I do have a documentary that is still in the works, and I really look forward to the day that I can share that with you guys. That's at a sort of a planning and pitching stage, pitching to channels. So prayers for that. And yeah, I will keep thinking of videos that could be useful for you guys, and please do in the comments, like, comment anything, ask me anything, but also anything you want to know about. Like, I mean, I know I'm not like, I'm definitely not those people that's like, I know everything, I'm some sort of medication taper guru. I don't think anyone is. But I think over time and over tapering 3 medications, obviously you do learn some stuff. And if you are at the beginning of your journey, it's useful to hear from somebody who is sort of on the end of theirs. We pray, being on 11 milligrams of mirtazapine, and currently I'm doing little cuts. Yeah, so much love.